The handcuffs clicked around my wrists as neighbors watched from their windows. Sheriff Karen smiled at me with cold satisfaction while her son Derek laughed behind her. I had done nothing wrong. I was standing in my own backyard by my own pool in the home I had just purchased. But none of that mattered to them. What they did not know was that I was Special Agent Maya Thompson, and I had been building federal cases against corrupt cops for the past 8 years. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. My name is Maya Thompson, and 3 weeks ago I thought I had found paradise. After 15 years with the FBI, working cases that took me from Detroit gang territories to white-collar crime rings in Manhattan, I had finally earned my dream assignment. The Bureau transferred me to the regional office in Ohio, and for the first time in my adult life, I could afford a house with a backyard. The two-story colonial sat on Maple Street in Riverside Heights, a quiet suburb where children rode bicycles and neighbors waved from their front porches. When I saw the in-ground pool sparkling in the afternoon sun during my first walkthrough, I knew this was home. After years of cramped apartments and hotel rooms, I would finally have my own piece of peace. That Saturday morning in June started like a dream. I had unpacked the last of my boxes the night before, and I woke up to sunshine streaming through my bedroom windows. The previous owners had left pool maintenance supplies in the garage, and I spent the morning learning how to test the water chemistry and clean the filter system. By noon, the temperature had climbed to 85 degrees. I changed into my navy blue swimsuit, grabbed a cold bottle of water, and stepped onto the wooden deck surrounding my pool for the first time as its owner. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the cloudless sky above. I had been working hate crime cases for the past 2 years, investigating churches that had been vandalized and families who had been terrorized because of their race or religion. The work was necessary, but it left scars on your soul. Every night I went to bed thinking about victims who had been targeted simply for existing in their own communities. But standing there beside my pool, listening to birds chirping in the oak trees that bordered my property, I felt something I had not experienced in years. Pure contentment. I was 38 years old, and for the first time since college, I was exactly where I wanted to be. I dipped my toe into the water. It was perfect. I set my bottle on the patio table I had assembled that morning and slid into the pool slowly, savoring every moment. The cool water wrapped around my body like a gentle embrace. I floated on my back, staring up at the endless blue sky, and allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have both a career fighting injustice and a peaceful place to call home. The neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of a lawn mower and children laughing somewhere down the street. I had chosen this community carefully, researching crime statistics and school ratings even though I had no children of my own. Everything about Riverside Heights suggested stability, safety, and the kind of neighborly respect that seemed to be disappearing from America. I was wrong about all of it. I had been floating peacefully for maybe 20 minutes when I heard footsteps on the gravel driveway beside my house. At first, I assumed it was a delivery driver or perhaps one of my neighbors stopping by to introduce themselves. I had been hopping to meet the people who lived around me, to become part of the community I had chosen. But when I looked toward the sound, I saw a young white man in his early 20s standing at my fence. He was tall and lean, wearing expensive designer jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than most people made in a day. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, and he had the kind of confident posture that comes from never being told no. He was staring at me with an expression I recognized immediately from my work, pure disgust mixed with entitlement. I had seen that look on the faces of suspects who believed they were superior to everyone around them. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice carrying the sharp edge of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You need to get out of there." I treaded water, confused but still hoping this was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe he thought I was using someone else's pool. Maybe he was a maintenance worker who had the wrong address. "I am sorry," I replied politely. "Is there a problem?" He stepped closer to the fence, gripping the wooden slats with both hands. "Yeah, there is a problem. You do not belong here. This is a family neighborhood." The words hit me like a physical blow. In my years with the Bureau, I had investigated hundreds of hate crimes. I had interviewed countless victims who described the moment they realized they were being targeted not for anything they had done, but simply for who they were. I never imagined I would experience that feeling in my own backyard. "I live here," I said, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "This is my home." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sure it is. Look, I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but you need to get out of that pool and off this property before I call the cops." I swam to the edge of the pool and pulled myself out, water dripping onto the deck. I reached for my towel, wrapping it around my shoulders while maintaining eye contact with this stranger who had invaded my peace. "What is your name?" I asked. Derek Patterson, and you are trespassing." "Derek, I bought this house 3 weeks ago. I have the deed, the mortgage paperwork, and the keys. This is my property, and that is my pool." His face reddened with anger. "I do not care what fake papers you have. People like you do not belong in neighborhoods like this. My mother is the sheriff of this county, and she does not tolerate troublemakers." The threat was clear. He was not just a racist neighbor. He was a racist neighbor whose mother wore a badge and carried a gun. He believed his family's position in law enforcement made him untouchable. "I am not making any trouble," I said. "I am swimming in my own pool on my own property. If you have concerns about my presence here, you are welcome to check the public records." Derek pulled out his phone. "We will see about that. Mom is going to love this." As he dialed, I noticed a black BMW parked in front of my house. The car was new and expensive, the kind of vehicle that suggested wealth and privilege. Everything about Derek Patterson screamed money and connections. He held the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving my face. "Mom, you need to get over to Maple Street right now. We have a situation." 20 minutes later, a white patrol car pulled into my driveway followed by 2 more sheriff's department vehicles. I had used those 20 minutes to go inside, change into jeans and a t-shirt, and gather my identification documents. My FBI credentials were locked in my bedroom safe, and I made a conscious decision to leave them there. I wanted to see how this situation would unfold if I were just an ordinary citizen. The woman who emerged from the first patrol car was clearly Derek's mother. She had the same blonde hair and sharp features, but where Derek carried himself with entitled arrogance, she moved with the practiced authority of someone who had spent years enforcing her will through the power of her uniform. Sheriff Corinne Patterson was in her early 50s, tall and broad-shouldered. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her badge polished to a mirror shine. She wore her authority like armor, and I could see immediately that she was someone who had never been challenged by anyone she considered beneath her. 2 deputies climbed out of the other vehicles. Both were younger men who looked uncomfortable as they approached my front door. One kept glancing between Derek and his mother, while the other studied his boots as if they contained the secrets of the universe. "Are you the homeowner?" Sheriff Patterson asked, her voice carrying the tone of someone who already knew the answer she wanted. "Yes, ma'am, I am Maya Thompson. I purchased this house 3 weeks ago." "I need to see some identification." I handed her my driver's license, mortgage documents, and homeowner's insurance paperwork. She examined them with theatrical care, holding each document up to the light as if checking for forgeries. "These could be fake," she said finally. "Derek tells me you were trespassing on private property." "This is my private property," I replied. "Your son came to my fence and demanded that I leave my own backyard." Derek stepped forward. "She was using the pool like she owned the place, Mom. I told her this is a family neighborhood." Sheriff Patterson handed my documents back without acknowledging their legitimacy. "Ma'am, I am going to need you to come with me for questioning. We have received reports of suspicious activity in this area." "What suspicious activity?" "That is not your concern. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The deputies shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, spoke up quietly. "Sheriff, her documents look legitimate. Maybe we should verify ownership through the county records before we—" "Deputy Morrison, I did not ask for your opinion," Sheriff Patterson snapped. "This woman is coming with us for questioning, and that is final." My FBI training kicked in. I remained calm, cooperative, and observant. I memorized badge numbers, noted the time, and made mental recordings of every word spoken. If Sheriff Patterson wanted to abuse her authority, I would give her enough rope to hang herself. "I am willing to cooperate," I said, "but I would like to know what crime I am suspected of committing." "Trespassing, disturbing the peace, and resisting a lawful order." "I have not resisted any orders. I have been cooperative and respectful." Derek laughed. "Listen to her, Mom. She thinks she can lawyer her way out of this." Sheriff Patterson pulled out her handcuffs. "Turn around." "Sheriff, I am standing on my own property holding legitimate ownership documents. I have committed no crime." "You committed a crime the moment you decided to cause trouble in my county. Turn around now, or I will add resisting arrest to your charges." I looked at the deputies, hoping to see some sign of conscience or professional integrity. Deputy Morrison looked sick to his stomach, but he made no move to intervene. The other deputy was staring at his radio as if hopping for a call that would get him out of this situation. "This is a violation of my civil rights," I said. "Your rights are whatever I say they are," Sheriff Patterson replied. "Welcome to my county." The handcuffs were too tight. Sheriff Patterson had deliberately adjusted them to cause discomfort, a petty abuse of power that spoke volumes about her character. As she led me toward her patrol car, I noticed curtains moving in windows throughout the neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson from next door stood on her front porch with her arms crossed, shaking her head in disapproval. At first, I thought she was upset about my treatment, but then I realized her disapproval was directed at me. In her mind, the sheriff's actions validated whatever prejudices she had been harboring since the day I moved in. But other neighbors looked disturbed. The young couple across the street stood in their driveway, the woman holding her phone as if she were recording. An elderly man 2 houses down watched from his garden, his face creased with concern. Derek walked beside his mother like a conquering hero returning from battle. "I told you she was trouble, Mom. People like her always cause problems." "Derek, go home," Sheriff Patterson said. "I will handle this from here." "I want to press charges for trespassing." "She was on her own property, Derek. We cannot charge her with trespassing." For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps Sheriff Patterson retained some shred of professional integrity. Perhaps she would recognize that this entire situation was built on her son's racism and her own prejudice. But then she continued speaking, and that hope died. "However, we can charge her with disturbing the peace, creating a public nuisance, and interfering with a police investigation. What investigation? I asked. The investigation into your suspicious behavior. The circular logic was breathtaking. I was suspicious because I was being investigated, and I was being investigated because I was suspicious. In the hands of a corrupt sheriff, the law became whatever she needed it to be. Sheriff Patterson, you are violating my constitutional rights. I have committed no crime, and you have no legal justification for this arrest. I have all the justification I need. You are causing a disturbance in my community. By swimming in my own pool. By not knowing your place. The words hung in the air like poison. There it was, the truth beneath all the legal pretense. This was not about law enforcement or public safety. This was about a racist sheriff and her racist son using their power to terrorize someone who did not fit their vision of who belonged in their community. Derek smiled with satisfaction. Maybe next time you will think twice before moving somewhere you do not belong. Sheriff Patterson opened the door of her patrol car and placed her hand on my head to guide me into the back seat. The vinyl was hot from the summer sun, and the cage between the front and back seats made me feel like a caged animal. "Sheriff, this is wrong," Deputy Morrison said quietly. "She has done nothing illegal." "Deputy Morrison, if you have a problem with how I run my department, you are welcome to find employment elsewhere." The young deputy's face flushed red, but he said nothing more. I watched him through the car window as Sheriff Patterson climbed into the driver's seat. He looked like a man watching his own soul die. As we drove away from my house, I saw neighbors gathering in small groups on the sidewalk. Some looked upset by what they had witnessed, while others nodded with approval. The community I had hoped to join was divided, and I was the unwitting catalyst. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. "To the county jail, where you belong." "On what charges?" "I told you, disturbing the peace." "By existing." Sheriff Patterson adjusted her rearview mirror to look at me. "By forgetting that there are rules in this world. Some people belong in certain places and others do not. The sooner you learn that lesson, the easier your life will be." I stared out the window at the suburban streets passing by. Children played in yards while their parents watched from lawn chairs. American flags hung from front porches. Everything looked peaceful and normal, but underneath the surface, hatred festered like an infected wound. "Sheriff, this is not over," I said. She laughed. "For you, it has not even begun." 3 hours later, I sat in a holding cell at the county jail, still wearing the clothes I had put on to deal with Derek's initial confrontation. Sheriff Patterson had booked me on charges of disturbing the peace and creating a public nuisance, then left me to contemplate what she called the natural consequences of poor decision-making. The cell was small and clean, but it reeked of industrial disinfectant and human desperation. I had been in county jails before as part of my FBI work, but always as a federal agent with authority and backup. Sitting behind those bars as a prisoner gave me a new perspective on how the system could be weaponized against the innocent. At 6 o'clock, a public defender named James Walsh arrived for what he called a courtesy consultation. He was young, overworked, and clearly overwhelmed by his caseload. When I explained the circumstances of my arrest, his expression shifted from professional detachment to genuine concern. "Mrs. Thompson, what you are describing sounds like a clear violation of your civil rights. Unfortunately, Sheriff Patterson has a reputation for this kind of behavior." "What kind of behavior?" "Selective enforcement, harassment of people she considers undesirable. The problem is that most of her victims are poor or minority residents who cannot afford to fight back. What about complaints to the state? Filed and ignored. Sheriff Patterson has political connections throughout the state government. She also has a clean record on paper because she is careful about how she documents her arrests. Walsh showed me the arrest report. According to Sheriff Patterson's narrative, I had been acting in an aggressive and threatening manner toward local residents and had refused to comply with lawful orders to disperse. None of it was true, but it was written in the official language of law enforcement. Can you get me released tonight? I can try. The magistrate is supposed to set bail within 24 hours, but sometimes these things get delayed over the weekend. After Walsh left, I used my one phone call to contact my supervisor at the FBI field office. Special Agent in charge Robert Martinez had been my mentor for 5 years, and I trusted him with my life. Maya, where the hell are you? I have been trying to reach you all afternoon. I am in the Riverside County Jail, Rob. I need you to listen carefully and not react until I finish explaining. I gave him the complete story, from Derek's initial confrontation to my arrest by his mother. Martinez listened without interruption, but I could hear his breathing getting heavier as I described Sheriff Patterson's behavior. Maya, we are going to get you out of there tonight. Then we are going to destroy these people. Rob, I want to handle this carefully. If we move too fast, they will claim this is federal overreach or retaliation. They violated the civil rights of a federal agent. They violated the civil rights of a citizen. My status as an agent is irrelevant to the constitutional issues here. There was a long pause. What do you want to do? I want to stay undercover and build a case. I need you to do some research on Sheriff Patterson and the department. I suspect this is not the first time she has abused her authority. Maya, you do not have to do this. We can have you out of there in 2 hours and file federal charges by Monday morning. If we do that, she walks away with a slap on the wrist and early retirement. I want to build a case that will put her in prison and clean up this entire department. Martinez was quiet for a moment. How long do you need? Give me 2 weeks. Keep someone ready to move if things go bad, but let me gather evidence first. You are playing a dangerous game. I am doing my job. After the call, I lay on the narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling. In my 15 years with the Bureau, I had investigated corrupt politicians, organized crime figures, and domestic terrorists. But I had never experienced the helpless rage that comes from being victimized by the very system you have sworn to protect. Sheriff Patterson thought she was untouchable. She believed her badge and her political connections made her immune to consequences. She was wrong. By morning, I would be released on bail and free to begin the most important investigation of my career. But I would not be investigating as Special Agent Maya Thompson. I would be investigating as Maya Thompson, private citizen and victim of police brutality. The difference would be everything. 2 days after my release, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading the local newspaper's account of my arrest. The headline read, "Suspicious Woman Arrested After Disturbance Call," and the article repeated Sheriff Patterson's narrative without question. According to the reporter, I had been acting erratically and refused to cooperate with police. There was no mention of Derek's racist confrontation or Sheriff Patterson's violation of my rights. The newspaper, like many institutions in small towns, seemed to operate as an extension of local law enforcement rather than an independent source of information. But I was not discouraged. Every lie they told would eventually become evidence against them. Special Agent Martinez had worked quickly over the weekend. On Monday morning, he called with information that confirmed my suspicions about Sheriff Patterson's department. Maya, we pulled 5 years of complaint records from the state attorney general's office. Sheriff Patterson has been the subject of 17 formal complaints, mostly from minority residents alleging harassment, excessive force, and discriminatory enforcement. How many resulted in disciplinary action? 0. Every complaint was either dismissed as unfounded or resolved through what they call additional training. What about her son Derek? 3 arrests as a juvenile, all sealed. 2 complaints of harassment filed against him in the past year, both dropped when the complainants decided not to pursue the matter. I made notes as Martinez continued his briefing. Rob, I need surveillance equipment and backup support. I want to document everything they do from now on. What kind of equipment? Audio recording devices, video cameras, and GPS tracking for my vehicle. If they are going to continue harassing me, I want every second of it recorded. Maya, if they discover you are recording them, this could turn dangerous. It is already dangerous. The question is whether we gather enough evidence to stop them permanently. Over the next week, I established a routine designed to give Derek and his mother opportunities to reveal their true nature. Every morning, I sat by my pool reading case files from my legitimate FBI work. Every afternoon, I walked through the neighborhood, smiling and waving at neighbors who either ignored me or watched me with suspicious eyes. Derek took the bait on Thursday. I was weeding the small flower garden beside my front porch when his BMW pulled into my driveway. This time, he brought 2 friends with him. I thought I told you to stay away from this neighborhood, he said, climbing out of his car with theatrical swagger. I activated the recording device hidden in my pocket. Derek, this is my home. I have every right to be here. You have the right to keep your mouth shut and stop causing problems. His friends laughed, emboldened by their leader's confidence. One of them, a heavy-set young man with tattoos covering his forearms, stepped closer to my flower bed. Maybe she needs someone to explain the rules to her, he said. What rules? I asked. The rules about knowing your place, Derek replied. My mother was too easy on you last time. Next time you might not be so lucky. I continued weeding, maintaining the appearance of calm while my heart raced. Are you threatening me, Derek? I am educating you. About what? About how things work in the real world. Some people belong in certain places and others do not. You do not belong here. His friend with the tattoos picked up a small garden stone and tossed it casually in his hand. Maybe we should help her understand. Put the stone down, I said firmly. Or what, you will call the cops, Derek laughed. My mother is the cops. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my knees. I am asking you politely to leave my property. And I am asking you politely to leave my neighborhood. Your neighborhood. My family has lived here for 3 generations. We built this community. We decide who belongs and who does not. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Derek and his friends making increasingly explicit threats while I recorded every word. They spoke about keeping the neighborhood clean and protecting property values and maintaining standards. Their language was coded, but their meaning was clear. When they finally left, I had everything I needed to prove a pattern of harassment. But I wanted more than harassment charges. I wanted to document the systemic corruption that allowed people like Derek to operate with impunity. That night, I called Martinez with an update. Rob, I think Sheriff Patterson is going to escalate soon. Derek's behavior is getting bolder, which suggests he believes his mother will protect him no matter what he does. How do you want to handle it? I want to give them more rope. Let them hang themselves completely before we act. Maya, promise me you will call for backup if things get out of hand. I promise. But Rob, when we finally move, I want federal charges that will stick. I want civil rights violations, conspiracy, abuse of authority, and anything else we can prove. The neighborhood meeting was Sheriff Patterson's idea. According to the flyer that appeared in every mailbox on Maple Street, concerned citizens were invited to discuss recent disturbances and maintaining community standards. The meeting would be held at the community center on Friday evening, with Sheriff Patterson available to address safety concerns. I knew it was a trap, but it was also an opportunity. If Sheriff Patterson wanted to make her harassment public, I would give her an audience for her own destruction. The community center was packed when I arrived at 7 o'clock. Nearly 50 neighbors filled the folding chairs arranged in neat rows facing a small stage. Sheriff Patterson stood at a podium wearing her dress uniform, every medal and commendation polished to perfection. Derek sat in the front row beside two other young men I recognized from previous encounters. They watched me with predatory smiles as I found a seat in the back corner, close to the exit, but still within clear sight of everyone present. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Sheriff Patterson began. "We are here to discuss a situation that threatens the safety and character of our community." She did not mention my name, but every eye in the room turned toward me. The message was clear. I was the situation. Over the past 2 weeks, we have received multiple reports of suspicious activity, confrontational behavior, and attempts to intimidate longtime residents. As your sheriff, I want to assure you that we take these concerns seriously. Mrs. Henderson from next door raised her hand. "Sheriff, what can we do to protect ourselves?" The first step is awareness. We need to watch out for each other and report anything unusual to my office immediately. "What counts as unusual?" asked a middle-aged man I did not recognize. Derek stood up and turned to face the crowd. "People who do not belong here, people who cause trouble, people who refuse to respect the way we do things in this community." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. I remained silent, recording everything through the device hidden in my purse. Sheriff Patterson regained control of the meeting. "We have established protocols for dealing with troublemakers. If you see suspicious activity, call my office. If you feel threatened, call my office. If someone refuses to leave when asked, call my office." "What if they claim they have a right to be here?" asked another voice. "Rights are earned through respect and contribution to the community," Sheriff Patterson replied. "People who cause problems forfeit those rights." I had heard enough. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 50 pairs of eyes watching my every movement. "Sheriff Patterson, I have a question." The room fell silent. Sheriff Patterson's hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by the people sitting closest to the stage. "Ma'am, this meeting is for community residents only." "I am a community resident. I live at 142 Maple Street." "You are a troublemaker who has been arrested for disturbing the peace." "I was arrested for swimming in my own pool while black." Gasps filled the room. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded with approval at my directness. Derek jumped to his feet. "She is lying. She was trespassing and refused to leave when asked." "Derek, sit down," his mother commanded. But Derek was too angry to obey. "Mom, why are we even talking to her? You should arrest her right now for disrupting this meeting." "Derek," I said, "sit down." "No, I am tired of pretending this is complicated. She does not belong here, and everyone knows it." The room erupted in competing voices. Some people shouted their agreement with Derek, while others called for calm. Sheriff Patterson banged a gavel on the podium, but the crowd was beyond her control. In the chaos, I saw my moment. I walked to the front of the room, pulled out my FBI credentials, and held them high above my head. "My name is Special Agent Maya Thompson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," I announced in a voice trained to cut through noise and confusion. "For the past 2 weeks, I have been the victim of systematic harassment and civil rights violations by Sheriff Patterson and her son Derek." The room fell silent as if someone had flipped a switch. Sheriff Patterson's face went white, then red, then white again. Derek's mouth hung open in shock. "Every conversation has been recorded. Every threat has been documented. Every violation of my constitutional rights has been preserved as evidence." I looked directly at Sheriff Patterson. "Sheriff, you are under federal investigation for civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their constitutional rights." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Derek found his voice. "You are lying. You are not FBI. This is some kind of trick." I held up my credentials again. Badge number 2847, 15 years of service. Currently assigned to the Regional Office investigating hate crimes and police misconduct. Sheriff Patterson finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You set us up." I defended myself. "The setup was your choice to abuse your authority instead of doing your job." The federal agents arrived at 6 o'clock Monday morning. I watched from my kitchen window as 3 black SUVs pulled up to Sheriff Patterson's house 4 blocks away. Special Agent Martinez had assembled a team of 12 agents to execute simultaneous search warrants on the sheriff's home, her office, and Derek's apartment. By noon, the story was spreading across social media and local news outlets. "FBI arrests sheriff in civil rights case" dominated headlines throughout Ohio and neighboring states. The narrative that had been building in Sheriff Patterson's favor for 2 weeks collapsed in a matter of hours. The evidence we gathered was overwhelming. Recording devices had captured Derek making explicit racial threats. Video surveillance showed Sheriff Patterson's deputies planting evidence during traffic stops involving minority drivers. Financial records revealed that the sheriff had been using department funds for personal expenses, including Derek's car payments and credit card bills. But the most damaging evidence came from Sheriff Patterson's own files. During the search of her office, agents discovered a folder labeled "Problem Citizens" that contained detailed surveillance reports on 17 different families. Every family was either minority or had been involved in complaints against the department. The folder included photographs taken without consent, personal information gathered through illegal database searches, and notes about enforcement opportunities that revealed a systematic campaign of harassment. Derek was arrested at his apartment while trying to flee the state. In his BMW, agents found a loaded handgun, a bag of methamphetamine, and a notebook containing detailed plans for cleaning up the neighborhood. The notebook included the addresses of 6 minority families and specific strategies for forcing them to move away. Sheriff Patterson was taken into custody at her office, still wearing her uniform and still protesting her innocence. As agents led her away in handcuffs, she looked directly at the news cameras and said, "I was protecting my community from troublemakers." The comment became a rallying cry for civil rights advocates, and a symbol of everything wrong with American policing. Within hours, the video was viewed millions of times on social media platforms. 2 days later, I stood in my backyard beside the pool where this entire ordeal had begun. The water was still crystal clear, reflecting the same blue sky that had welcomed me to this neighborhood 3 weeks earlier. But everything else had changed. Neighbors who had ignored me or treated me with suspicion now stopped by to apologize and introduce themselves. Mrs. Henderson brought homemade cookies and tears of shame. The young couple across the street invited me to their barbecue. Even the elderly man from down the street knocked on my door to ask if I needed anything. "Agent Thompson, I owe you an apology," Mrs. Henderson said as we sat on my patio furniture. "I believed what I wanted to believe instead of seeing what was really happening." "You do not owe me anything," I replied. "But you do owe it to yourself and this community to speak up when you see injustice happening." The criminal cases moved quickly through federal court. Derek pleaded guilty to civil rights violations and hate crime charges, receiving a sentence of 8 years in federal prison. Sheriff Patterson was convicted on 14 counts including civil rights violations, conspiracy, embezzlement, and abuse of authority. She received 18 years in federal prison. 3 deputies were fired and faced criminal charges for their roles in the harassment campaign. The entire department was placed under federal oversight pending restructuring and retraining. But the most important change happened in the community itself. Riverside Heights became a symbol of what can happen when ordinary citizens stand up to corruption and demand justice. The neighborhood association established new policies promoting diversity and inclusion. The local newspaper hired a new editor who prioritized independent reporting over law enforcement public relations. 6 months later, as I floated in my pool on another perfect summer day, I thought about the lesson this experience had taught me. Evil flourishes when good people remain silent. Justice requires courage from everyone, not just those who wear badges or carry credentials. I had come to Riverside Heights looking for peace and quiet. Instead, I found a community that needed healing and a system that demanded reform. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not in distant cities or federal courtrooms, but in our own backyards by our own swimming pools. The water was still perfect. The sky was still blue. But the neighborhood had learned something valuable about justice, dignity, and the price of looking the other way when our neighbors are under attack. Some fights are worth having, some stands are worth taking, and sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the person who will bring you to justice.